Hi, Tony. Look, first of all, thank you very much for taking part in the Business Spotlight series. It's always really interesting to get different businesses on board, and I know you've actually got a lot of experience that I think is relevant to our audience. So on that note, I'm going to hand over to you. Introduce yourself, your business, and what you do, please.
Well, thank you, Ed, and thank you very much for inviting me to come and join you and perhaps hopefully share something. I'm not sure if I've got anything that's suitably valuable, because I think you as an action coach probably know as much, if not more than me, about helping companies. But for the last 30 years, Tony Groom, been helping SMEs through my company, K2 Business Partners. And essentially, we generally only meet companies when they're in some form of financial difficulty or they're struggling to achieve their potential. And sometimes it's existential, but essentially there's normally some trigger that crystallizes a requirement for some level of help. And we generally try not to sell ourselves purely because we're not trying to foist ourselves on people. We only want to help businesses that themselves want help, because our approach is very much to partner with them with a view to sharing the future profits, because we generally don't take fees, we don't charge fees. So we want to become essentially a partner with the company that's got some reason for wanting help. And the help is unusual in that, because we've been working together as a small team for years, on one level, we come across or come along as a sort of a ready formed team, because we've decided that actually working by yourself is really lonely, and that might relate to some of the smaller companies that are listening. And it can be incredibly lonely, especially when you're trying to deal with problems. You've got a bit of pressure, you've got a bad debt, and as a result haven't got the cash you want. And trying to do all that by yourself and be the sort of the person with broad shoulders, looking after everyone, reassuring everyone in the company that they've got a future, despite the fact they all know that money's tight, is difficult. And that's why we tend try to turn up as a team to help businesses. And the other aspect of us as a team is we've got some complementary skills that we generally bring to businesses to fill the gaps that they may not have, if that makes sense.
And obviously you mentioned the team there. Now I've had a little, but do you want to share a bit about the people you've got in the team and the types of things that they do?
So for instance, so one of my colleagues, Tim Ellis-Smith, he was with a small company called Grand Met, and he persuaded them that he should represent them buying a small ice cream company when it was very, very small indeed, and he turned it into a global company called Häagen-Dazs. That's the sort of flavour. Another of my partners spent most of his life with PricewaterhouseCoopers in the restructuring team, and he's very much more hands-on restructuring, although at the moment he's running an engineering business in Huddersfield, and he sort of spends a bit of time with me running another of our businesses down in Shrewsbury that manufactures and distributes foundation and walling systems to housing industry, construction industry. They're all passive house compliant businesses. One of my colleagues is I'm sure she won't thank me, but she's a Bangladeshi tiger mum, incredibly driven. She helped found a hedge fund, and she's essentially been dealing with some of the tech companies we've got interests in. Another of my colleagues is in fact down in Exeter at the moment, turning around a service business. So we're an eclectic team. We've got some complementary skills. The last one is actually a former banker based out of Birmingham, and he's helping me look at some engineering businesses at the moment, but he's not heavily engaged. We got an unusual portfolio. We tend to work together. We always sort of speak with each other all the time, because although one of us might be on site or dealing with, let's say banks or HMRC to try and get some support when they're climbing out of their tree, it's much easier to sort of just check with each other. And I hope in due course during the call I'll sort of share with you the process that we all follow, because it's just a process.
So why not let's talk about that just now. So tell me a bit about the process you follow.
So it's interesting because having done this for 30 years, you realize that first of all, businesses sort of have their trials and tribulations along the way, and just every now and then, we all come across a problem that seems insurmountable, and certainly at the moment, we're dealing with sort of problems where a number of companies have, in order to survive, borrowed money or they've not paid bills, whether it's rent or HMRC. And the pressure that's being put on them, in particular the owners, the emotional pressure, none the least the financial pressure, is huge. And they've been trying to work out how to, basically how to keep creditors at bay, or HMRC at bay, or landlords at bay. And the process involved is often a very rational one, despite the emotional sort of feelings that are surging around your mind when you're dealing with the problem, because you take that phone call and you're immediately on the defensive. And our process involves putting in place a 13-week cash management system, so we know exactly where the cash is coming from, we know where it's going, we know who to, and that unemotionally manages who gets paid. And you can imagine the emotion when someone's hassling you for money, and so you pay them, and you discover you haven't got the money to pay wages at the end of the week. So it's that sort of very rational approach to very tightly managing cash. We always put that in, and then we always use a forecast-based business model to model every single line item of a business. And by line item, I mean, for instance, if you've got half a dozen loans, plant and machinery loans, bank loans, different forms of loans, if you model them, both their repayment terms and their interest terms, and then equally, if you model every aspect of the business, it may be you've got several marketing contracts or marketing staff or marketing initiatives. If you have them as a separate line item in a forecast, it allows you to see the cost of each item in a business and whether or not you can evaluate whether or not it contributes money. Exactly the same with income lines. It may be product, or it may be service, or it may be customers. If you model every line and you look at how much money you're making, most of us are making money on some form of Pareto business basis, where we're making 80% of our profits out of 20% of our products or 20% of our customers. And that brutal, stark sort of visualization of numbers allows really sensible decisions to be made, which in part, which is our process of making decisions about helping basically get to a point where a company can grow.
Perfect. Yeah, that makes all the sense. Making sure it's all visible and it's actually measured with data.
It's just a process, and it's a bit like dealing with people. And we have a sort of a slightly systems-based approach to looking at businesses. You could argue that businesses are systems of systems, and we think in terms of three systems. There's the system that's defined by money, and if you looked at a business and you didn't speak with anyone or look at anything and you just looked at the money flows, you should see the business. And people will tell us, oh, I value my people, and it's very easy to look in the numbers and see whether or not people are paid properly, whether or not there are functions, there are incentives and bonuses, and that there's welfare program, and you can see all of that through the numbers. Exactly the same, you can see numbers flowing in and out from customers and costs, and you can see, theoretically, if you looked at the numbers, you should be able to see the business, and equally you should be able to see the people. If you put the numbers to one side and you just looked at the people, you just went and spoke to everyone, you spoke with customers, you spoke with suppliers and subcontractors and staff, you should see the numbers, and the numbers should be the same as what people say. Inevitably, they're often different, and managers might tell you one thing and staff might tell you something else. We've always had a secret secret source when dealing with industrial engineering businesses. One of the people that works with us is a former Unite the Union leader. I met him years ago. He was on the other side of the fence negotiating on behalf of staff. We got on well, and he's an absolute brilliant person for going to have a chat with people on a shop floor and just tell us what everyone thinks. And the maddest thing is this: we normally get told the answer. It's just managers never ask them. So if you speak with people, theoretically, you should see the numbers. Also, you should see happy clients. You should see all the systems. You should see the plant and machinery or the services being provided. So that's another lens, people. And then the third lens might be if you just looked at the business, you didn't look at the numbers, you didn't look at people. You know, I like walking around a factory late at night when there's no one there. I like to look in the back of service vehicles and see whether they're full of kit that's just been thrown in unwashed, or are they all mounted on shadow boards, or, you know, how well is the equipment serviced? How well do the vehicles get parked up, fueled up, ready to go the next day? You know, you just get all these simple things. And, you know, I have a sort of a funny quirky thing. I always inspect the ladies' lavatories, and it's just fascinating because two examples. One company I successfully turned around, they hadn't been able to pay the cleaners for several months. Everyone was doom and gloom, but I discovered in the ladies' lavatory it was absolutely pristine. The ladies in the company looked after the lavatory. It was a work. The men's lavatory, you know, there wasn't any swafiga. It was just dirty. But the ladies' lavatory was clean with some tissues and some toiletries. And I realized that they had self-respect and pride, and that I knew I could work with the people. And we turned the company around. But another business I looked at, I saw feces on the wall. I just walked out and closed it down. It was just a non-starter. They didn't have the self. So you end up with these quirky things, you know, walking around businesses. Notice boards are always a giveaway. You know, I've seen companies with 3-year-old staff Christmas parties, you know, still on the notice board, or out of date insurance policies, you know, all sorts of things. And they all add up to a picture. And if you think about those three lenses, the three I've talked about, putting everything in terms of money, or putting everything in terms of people, or putting everything in terms of the other aspects of a business, the products, the equipment. If you put them all together, you should see the same company. And what is extraordinary is how they overlap, because in the middle, you're looking at the strategy, you're looking at the culture, you're looking at the purpose, the key proposition, you're looking at the values. And you know, we've heard this sort of phrase, I hope, strategy eats tactics for breakfast, which everyone cites. But in my experience, culture eats strategy. Give me the right culture, give me the right people, and we can make amazing things happen.
Yeah.
I'm sorry,
I think I got
love the
environment
topic.
as well, yeah. No,
you know, I could talk about this for hours. It's just, you know, and it's not intended to be navel contemplation. This is the core of business, and just sorting these things out. On one hand, they're basics, but people say it's not rocket science. The problem is this: people are more complicated than science or than physics. Rocket science is a binary thing. You know, the physics is either right or wrong, whereas people are much more complicated. And we you know, to our detriment, try to manage people by email or what have you. They're living, breathing creatures, and they have families to support, and understanding them is so important. And you know, you can see how this isn't about looking at the numbers and saying, well, the numbers say do this. It's actually about understanding the people, because the people drive the numbers.
Yeah, no, really interesting. Look, on that, obviously I guess that's one of the challenges is communicating these things, getting people to understand, you know, the difference you can make. What would you say the challenges moving forward for your business?
Well, we've been incredibly fortunate. Although in the 90s, you know, essentially I worked as a company doctor, running companies that were in difficulties. Since 2001, we've been having a dual strategy of trying to take minority equity or majority equity in companies to turn them around. By the way, we don't believe in selling companies. Why sell a great company? If you've got a great company, you know, enjoy it, because, you know, if you sell a company, you'll make less money out of the sale than you will if you own it for the long term. So the problem for us has been to find that split between trying to take equity in companies and trying to basically earn fees. And the split has moved in the wrong way, in that in that there's been so much money sloshing around. In my view, companies have been overvalued at today's price, and that's why we just haven't bought many companies over the last 10 or 12 years, since really the great financial crisis, about 2009, because they've been overvalued. But by the same token, there hasn't actually been very much work around. We've been lucky in that, we do have some companies in the portfolio that sustain us. But the challenge for us has been basically finding companies to have a chat, because all too often, if they do have a problem, their accountant often introduces them to an insolvency practitioner where the answer is insolvency, whereas we want to avoid it and settle things down. And it's a really difficult message to get across.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Really good point. And hopefully some accountants are paying attention today as well.
Well, the great thing is we work with the accountants because they're the ones often best placed to advise and reassure their clients. We are often really only dealing with some of the problems, and then just bringing those processes I was talking about to the table, where as much as anything else, you're just trying to bring some confidence and reassurance to an uncertain situation.
Yeah, definitely. It makes sense. And obviously, another thing you mentioned, you've been doing this now for 30 years. I always think it's interesting to find out from people, what's your biggest learning as a business owner over that time?
For me, it's always people. I mean, I like people, and I'm just endlessly fascinated by how difficult. And I think the biggest learning is this sort of understanding that there is so much sloshing around in our minds that we often have to sort of organize things in our own minds before we can discuss them with other people. And I think you as a coach will, might share that. And we don't, as a general rule, sort of seek therapy in UK or seek help. And it's that, we seem to have created a culture where we don't all work together. I'm astonished at how many small businesses don't have other small business friends, and they don't all sit on each other's boards and help each other. We just don't seem to have this sort of more collaborative approach to dealing with the really difficult problems.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely really, really key point, and definitely something that we've seen benefits for when that does happen. So yeah, really, really important thing to mention. And look, I get that I get the passion coming through when you're talking about it. What inspires you? What's the source of inspiration for you? Again,
it's people. I like people. Look, I spent the first 12 years of my life as a serviceman. My family for generations have all been soldiers. And I was a soldier. I was slightly unusual in that I owned a business while I was in the army, and I knew I wasn't going to stay forever. But I did. Sandhurst has this motto: "Serve to lead," and we probably have a misunderstanding of what leadership is, because leadership, we make the mistake, I think, of thinking that the leader sits at the apex of a pyramid or a triangle. In my view, the leader sits at the base of an inverted triangle, and therefore you're there to serve everyone, to support. And if you're not serving people, then you're not building relationships. You're not, it's all about me. When actually, if you're serving other people, it's all about them. So for me, that's I think the most. And along the way, don't get me wrong, a lot of successful businessmen are psychopaths. There's no doubt about it. They don't have a care for other people at all. They will walk over other people. But in my view, they are often shallow, sort of hollow human beings, because actually it's people, in my view, that sustain us all. In our relationships with our family. And often people don't actually ask what really is important when they get up in the morning, and why do they go to work? And I do not believe money is the driver of in particular small businesses. I think it's more about control and about self-sustenance and destiny. And it's just, in my view, those small businesses often can't support a lot of senior executives, which is why I advocate, this sort of partner approach to having support. It doesn't need to cost money to have friends. and most of us want to help. Although evaluating the help we get is very difficult as well, because often someone who knows more than you will set up will hold themselves out to be an expert, and that's another issue. We've got to evaluate, who really can help us, and ask the question, why is someone giving us that advice? And sort of slightly challenging it, because most people have a self-interest in any advice or help they offer.
Perfect. Yeah, definitely. It's easy to take advice at face value without thinking of where the source is, and is the source qualified, etc. So
well, I think this is where money gets in the way, and that if it's a paid advisor, whereas if your advice comes from business friends, people who've got shared experiences, small business. Again, I'm just surprised that more small businesses aren't working together, helping each other.
Yeah, definitely something for people to have a think about and look at ways to use that perhaps. So look, as a final thing, Tony, is there anything, or any offer or any news you'd like to share with the audience in relation to?
I would argue everyone in business, or everyone wanting to be in business, make friends with other people in business. Find senior sort of experienced people, and think of them as a sort of a business godparent. If you're experienced, find young people, support them. We need really to get a lot of help out to those very lonely people running their own business, and it's a wonderful thing when someone can build a business that sustains life, supports employees and their families. For me, they're the real heroes in society, and the more we can do to help them, the more we can do to support them, the better.
Yeah, I agree completely. Well, thank you very much for taking part. Likewise, I could talk about this for for all day as well, but great to get your insights into find out more about what you do. So thank you again for taking part in the series.
And thank you for having me. It's a real pleasure.